we're live. All right. Why don't we go ahead and call this meeting to order? Thank you all very much. Just a moment as I'm getting one little last thing organized in front of me. Come on, where are you? Oh. Come on. There it is. There it is. Move it over the other side of the screen. All right. Thank you, everyone. The time is now 6:03, and I would like to call this meeting to order of the CCTA Citizens Advisory Committee. Of course, first thing is we have to call attention to, we are still operating under AB 361 type remote rules. So if you could run the video for that right now, appreciate that very much.
Due to COVID-19, this meeting will be conducted as a Zoom meeting pursuant to the provisions of Assembly Bill 361, which suspends certain requirements of the Brown Act. This meeting is being live streamed on the CCTA website. The chair will call upon members, staff, and other speakers by name. Please speak clearly and state your name before giving comments or remarks. Persons participating via Zoom with their cameras enabled are reminded that their activities are visible to viewers. Members participating by Zoom wishing to speak should physically raise their hand and unmute their mic when called upon. Members should mute their mics when done speaking. Citizens participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the Raise Hand feature or dial *9 if participating via phone, and the chair or staff will call upon them at the appropriate time. Citizens will have 3 minutes to speak. After 3 minutes, staff will lower their hand and mute their mic. Participants via phone will be called upon by the last 4 digits of their phone number. It is requested that public speakers state their names and organization, but providing such information is voluntary. Written public comments received in accordance with the teleconferencing special notice for public comment guidelines are printed on the meeting agenda. If authors of the written correspondence would like to speak, they should raise their hand and the chair will call upon them at the appropriate time. All written correspondence received after that and during the meeting will be entered into the record. A roll call vote will be taken for all action items. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Tarian. All right. At this time, members of the public, if you're listening, and of course, if you were listening to that last video, I'm going to open public comment for items that you wish to make remarks on, which do not appear on the agenda this evening. So I'm going to give you a minute to kind of sort out whether you need to raise your hand in Zoom or press *9 on the phone. And Tarian, do you mind looking and see if we have anyone on online that wants to make a comment?
We don't have any written or verbal comments. And then also if I could take roll call of the members.
I'm so sorry. Let's go ahead and proceed with that. Yes.
Thank you. Member Ash?
Present.
Member Banker?
Present.
Member Carr? Absent. Member Chahal? Absent. Member Esquivel? Absent. Member Hammond?
Here.
Member Hurley?
Here.
Member Linder?
Here.
Member Moriarty?
Here.
Vice Chair Rosenberg?
Here.
Chair Miller?
Present. Thank you.
We have all members present except for Member Carr, Chahal, Esquivel, Powells, Vega, and Bristow. And we do have a quorum.
Very good. Thank you, Tarian. Sorry, I missed that on the script. I apologize. All right, at this time, I would like to move to item 2 on our agenda, which is public comment. Members of the public are invited to address the committee regarding any item that is not listed on the agenda. So, Tarian, have we received any public comments? You said.
No written or verbal public comments have been received.
Okay. And does it appear that there are any members of the public indicating they wish to speak during this period?
No, no public members are present.
Okay, wonderful. And so the next item on the agenda is the approval of the consent calendar. And because we lacked a quorum at the last meeting, we're actually looking at summary of actions from October 27th meeting, which I ran, and then the March 23rd meeting last month, which Larry ran, Vice Chair Rosenberg ran. And so I would like to ask if any members of the committee see anything in the summary of actions from October or March, or in the attendance log that appear to need corrections. I will, by the way, I will go ahead and state that I have noted that the voting action on the consent items from the last meeting needs to be updated. And Tarian has heard my mention of that before. So I think you already know what needs to be done there.
Yes, I will make that update before the document's finalized.
Thank you. And it's not a big deal, guys, because we didn't have a quorum last meeting, so that wasn't really an action that was taken anyway. All right, no hands raised, so no corrections or submissions to that. Okay. I believe we need to ask if there has been any public comment, or if you see any, Tarian, have you seen any public comments submitted, written or verbal, or someone raising their hand?
No written or verbal comments have been received.
Okay, then at this time, if I could receive a first and a second motion to approve the minutes with the changes as I indicated to Tarian.
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Hurley. And
I'll second.
sorry, who was that?
Sorry. Who made the second? Sorry.
Bill.
Hurley? Okay, thank you.
Oh,
Sorry, I was letting someone in.
that's
I
okay.
think that member Esquivel just joined the meeting.
Very
thank you.
good. All right, it's been moved and seconded. So Tarian, if you would just conduct the roll call vote.
Yes, thank you. Member Ash?
Aye.
Member Banker?
Abstain.
Member Esquivel?
Present.
Member Hammond?
Abstain.
Member Hurley?
Aye.
Member Linder?
Abstain.
Member Moriarty?
Aye.
Vice Chair Rosenberg?
Aye.
Chair Miller?
Aye. Can that motion pass with that number of abstentions?
No, we only have 7 yeses.
Right.
If member Hammond or Linder would like to change their vote, it would pass. You can vote on it if you were not at the last meeting, but it is your choice.
I'll change my vote to aye.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hammond.
Thank you. So motion passes with 8, and we've got absent members Bristow, Carr, Chahal, Moriarty, and I'm sorry, not Moriarty, Powell's, Vega. So motion passes.
Excellent. I appreciate everyone's help with the housekeeping. All right, so we've got an interesting meeting set aside here tonight for basically information is going to be traveling in one direction, and we're going to get a chance to have a fairly light action meeting, but lots of learning. So next item is an item from Matt to give us an update on what changes have happened to the Measure J program compliance checklist for this year. And Matt, if you'd like to go ahead and take over.
Chair Miller, I think we're going to start off
Oh.
with the executive director presentation tonight.
Oh,
I
all
know
right.
he
Whoops,
has-
appears I've jumped ahead. In fact, it's not nice to jump right over the XO.
I certainly don't want to jump over him. I'll leave
Yes.
that to you.
All right, Mr. Haley, I'm so sorry.
No
I
worries.
appreciate you joining us and give us some strategic vision for the year. I'll go ahead and let you take over and give us the idea of what's to come.
Well, this is great. I always enjoy the opportunity to talk at the Citizens Advisory Committee. And again, if you don't know who I am, I'm Tim Hale, the Executive Director of CCTA. And I was recently appointed the Executive Director in December of 20. And last year I came to the CAC to kind of share with you a little bit about the vision and kind of the direction that we want to go with the authority. And I thought what I would do today is kind of share with you some slides about what we're looking towards the future. This is the same presentation that I've been actually going around and talking to all of the city councils this year. So I've been going to all the 19 cities and talking to them about the future and also talking to them about the countywide transportation plan. And so I want to just share with you, so I'm going to launch this presentation here. And really the vision, if you remember from last time, it's really how to do a better job of really connecting all of our communities together, all of our travelers together into more of a more integrated transportation system. And by doing that, you know, what we can accomplish, hopefully, is by really providing personalized mobility options that people can really say, this is something I'm excited about, this is something I'm interested in, I want to take this mode of transportation, whether that be, you know, a bus or potentially in the future a shared autonomous vehicle or a bike. And so this is really our vision in terms of really bringing forward, you know, and recovering obviously from the pandemic. And so I think it kind of leads well on my next slide is, you know, we're kind of at this tipping point. And I'm sure all you're aware that transit is really in this recovery mode from the pandemic. And there are some challenges with that in terms of, you know, if you're riding BART, you know, quality of service, safety, cleanliness, but then you also have regular bus service that's really becoming more resilient and more attractive to people. But also we have this kind of new phenomenon of people working from home, and that's really changing people's travel behavior. And I'll talk about that in a moment. And I think also because we have people at home, you know, our trips are changing. It used to be everyone was, you know, going to work in the morning and coming back in the afternoon. And so by having everyone, you know, some I'll say margin of the population, being able to work from home, the trips are changing from a day-to-day standpoint, so that the peak period is becoming longer because not everyone's, you know, traveling during that same 2 or 3 hours. I mean, people are, you know, working at home during the peak period and then going to work afterwards, or vice versa. And so the other thing that's also happening is we've got major climate change. We also have a lot of new policies from the state regarding how we're going to meet, you know, our greenhouse gas goals, you know, to really shape the future of transportation. And so one thing that I think that we've learned from the pandemic is that, you know, transportation is not necessarily resilient because it doesn't necessarily provide the personalized mobility options that people are kind of looking for in terms of either not taking, you know, regular public transit or driving their car. And so what we did during the pandemic is we did these travel behavior studies, and we did one along the 80 corridor, the 680 corridor, Highway 4. And through that, we basically asked people a series of questions in terms of, you know, what were you doing before COVID? How were you traveling? How were you traveling during the pandemic? And then will your travel behavior and your habits change after the pandemic? And so we really found some interesting things. We got a lot of data, and that data is really helping us kind of, I'll say, rethink and reshape potentially, you know, the future of transportation. And so I wanted to share with you kind of the data. And this is just one question that we asked, and we've got, again, a lot of data, but what is your willingness to kind of shift into other modes if they were available to you? And so along the I-680 corridor, and some of you may live in Central County, West County, South County, East County. And, it varies between what part of the county that you're in. And that's actually quite interesting. And it really even emphasizes the point of making sure that we have, these personalized mobility options available to people. And so on the I-680, a lot of people were interested in carpooling. They were also really interested in, using Lyft and Uber, public transportation. And something that was really common in all of these is that people are interested in walking and biking more. And then also telecommuting. So if they had the option available to them, people would want to continue to telecommute. And I think we all realize the benefits of that in terms of quality of life, spending time with our family, but also being able to address and get a lot of our work done. And so on the I-80 corridor, BART is obviously way more prominent in the I-80 corridor. And because now we have Richmond ferry service, there's more people interested in taking ferry, express bus service, local bus service, but you'll see consistently walking is also another mode. 40%, we're already walking. And there's also a strong interest. About 43% want to shift their modes into walking. So that really kind of begs to how do we provide better infrastructure for walking and biking? And then on the State Route 4242 corridor, BART again was very, very prominent. BART is really a lifeline of transportation in East Contra Costa County and in the State Route 4 corridor. But surprisingly enough, you can see there walking was the second option. And so again, this real strong interest to walk, to also get into public transportation. And so it's really interesting to kind of see how this behavior really changes across the county. And so it really you start thinking about that, and how do you plan for a transportation system that's so different, right? That people are looking for all these different modes of transportation. And so that's something that we're really trying to tackle and as part of this update to the countywide transportation plan. So with this really growing need for walking and biking, I don't know if you know this, but in 2018, CCTA approved the countywide bicycle pedestrian plan, and that really outlined a network of what we call a low stress bicycle network, where anyone can ride their bike and feel comfortable in doing that. And so to address that, as part of that plan, there was also this strategy to adopt Vision Zero. So Vision Zero is really this goal and commitment to committing to zero fatalities on our roadways. And so if you look at the picture to the left, you'll see lots of people kind of walking and biking amongst cars. And so our infrastructure today is not conducive to walking and biking. And so what we need to do is really look for opportunities to have more dedicated space for walking, more dedicated space for biking, and really take a commitment both on the planning side or the local jurisdiction side, but also on the driver side. It's a commitment to both sides to make sure that as you're driving, obviously you're respecting the road. But similarly, as you're walking and biking, you're also respecting the road and making sure that you're following and complying with the rules. And one aspect of that is CCTA is developing what we call a bicycle garden. And that bicycle garden will be one of the first in California. It may even be the first in Western United States, I'm not sure. But it's really an opportunity to educate and teach both our younger generation, adults, of how to really navigate through this really complex biking and walking infrastructure. I'm sure when you drive around or you walk around, it's like you have all these signs and green paint, and it's just like, how do I navigate this, right? And so this bicycle garden is really an education opportunity to really do that safely and teach people to do that safely through what we call Street Smarts programs. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but our Street Smarts program is a program where we actually start at the lowest levels of education, kindergarten, 4th, 5th, 6th, all the way through high school. And we hold school assemblies to really stress the importance of following the rules of the road as a driver. So in high school, we'll work with California Highway Patrol and teach people how to be, as they're driving, more aware of people walking and biking. But then also, at the kid, I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and so we're teaching them how to obey the rules of the road, making sure the importance of wearing a helmet. And those are all just, kind of foundational elements of achieving, this Vision Zero goal. The other thing that we're also really focused on is our infrastructure is fairly fixed and built out today. I'm sure you're aware in where you live, a lot of the roads are pretty much built to their capacity. If you were going to widen a road today, you're probably going to be impacting a local business or a residence. And so now we have infrastructure that is pretty much fixed. And so how do we think and plan for using that space in the best way during certain times of the day? And so we're doing that through really leading. I've already talked about Vision Zero from the walking, biking aspects of it, but from a transit first perspective, how do we prioritize transit in our local jurisdictions, on our freeways, and really optimize existing transit to make it accessible, more efficient, more reliable. And so we're going to be developing what we're calling an integrated transit plan. And that integrated transit plan will really help identify, where are our high performing routes and how do we make those better and more reliable? But then where are maybe our not so high performing routes? And, can we look at better ways to support that through, first and last mile, maybe more on-demand transit where you can pick up your mobile device and be able to hail a bus to you or wherever you're at. But also making sure we're creating first and last mile connections. So if you could imagine, a network of share mobility hubs that provide these personalized mobility options that we've kind of listed in those initial slides, and be able to walk to a share mobility hub or bike to a share mobility hub within a half mile of your home, and be able to have access to transit, car share, shuttles, maybe even curbside management for carpooling or Ubers and Lyfts, if you will. And so really providing this network of share mobility hubs that would really provide this gateway to seamless mobility in Contra Costa County. And then also to help meet our climate change or our state goals for that, how do we move this transit fleet to zero emissions or near emissions? Like, for example, we're planning an express bus service right now on the I-680 that would operate every 30 minutes. It would go from Martinez Amtrak station to Walnut Creek BART to Bollinger Canyon Park and Ride there in Bishop Ranch, all the way down to the Dublin BART station. And then it would also be a hydrogen electric hybrid bus to really meet our zero emission goals. And then lastly, how do we get transit to people that don't have access to transit to really meet the needs of all of our underserved communities? And so this integrated transit plan is something significant. We're going to be getting ready to go out for request for proposal in the next few months. And it's probably about a 2-year effort. And quite honestly, we're spending quite a bit of money. We're going to spend about $2 million on the study because it's really very foundational to the future of transportation here in Contra Costa County. The other element that we're also working on is more of this countywide connected signal system. And we have 19 local jurisdictions here. All of them have signals. All of them are operating at different levels. All of them have different technologies at different levels. And so if we can do a better job of connecting these signals in between all of our local jurisdictions, we will be able to optimize traffic flow, also be able to have better detection for bicycles and pedestrians. And so, like, for example, and this is kind of in the future, but if we had better detection of bicycles and pedestrians, we would be able to understand where near misses are happening, so close calls. So we could, and by understanding that, we can plot that out in a heat map and be able to understand some of the more I'll say, critical areas that we need to address proactively to make sure we have better and improved, safer, safer walking and biking to meet those Vision Zero goals. The other key component of this transit or the signal system is to be able to prioritize certain vehicles. So transit, for example, emergency vehicles. So that way we can make sure we've got better response times for emergency vehicles, but also making sure that, again, transit is reliable. It's being prioritized through our local roads, and also preparing our local roads for the future. So as we're looking towards the future with connected autonomous vehicles, and I know Randy and myself have talked about Momentum Station. We operate this secure autonomous vehicle.
Tim, we lost your audio.
Can you hear me right now?
No, we can't.
That's interesting because I'm actually at the office. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
back now.
you're coming through
Okay. Okay.
5x5 now.
All right, interesting. See, I'm at the office. I'm at a landline, so that's really interesting. So, yeah, so preparing our quarter for the future. So, making sure that we have this, what we call vehicle to infrastructure communication. So, like, if you can imagine, again, to kind of get to those Vision Zero goals, if you can imagine an infrastructure that can communicate directly with vehicles, so that way a vehicle would know that it's going to collide or crash into another vehicle before it would even know it. So we would be able to basically eliminate or minimize or reduce accidents and fatalities in our local intersections, but also be able to send messages, to these vehicles, as well as people with personal mobile devices, to be able to alert them that, let's say you're walking across an intersection and there's a vehicle coming that's going to turn right. You could alert a pedestrian that, hey, there's a vehicle coming, hurry up or move out of the roadway. And then likewise in the vehicle, you could communicate to the vehicle of saying, there's a pedestrian around the corner, you should slow down or stop. And so that's how we can really leverage technology in this environment and really provide. And we're doing that we're testing that use case with a grant we got from USDOT, the Automated Driving System grant. And we're working with Nissan and Verizon on that.
Tim, happened
Lost you
again.
again.
You want me to maybe get out and rejoin the meeting or something, or can you hear me?
Because you're solid most of the time. There's just these occasional cutouts.
Okay.
I think we're still just at 2 of these happening. So why don't we just roll as if nothing's happened? But maybe if it happens again, we'll look at it.
Okay. So Contra Costa County is actually in the top 10 in the state in terms of electric vehicle adoption. And in I think it was 2018 again, we adopted the electric vehicle, or 2019, we adopted the electric vehicle readiness blueprint. And this really outlined the complete infrastructure and locations of electric vehicle charging. And, if you own a Tesla today, you'll be able to go into your Tesla and say, I want to go from here to there. And it'll tell you where you can charge, and it'll tell you what your dwell times to be able to charge to make that trip happen. If you don't own a Tesla, you don't have that type of technology at your fingertips. And so what we want to do is create a future where in these corridors, you've got reliable electric vehicle charging, but also with the means to be able to make those trips, whether you want to go from the Bay Area down to Southern California, or from East Contra Costa County to let's say from Brentwood to Richmond. And so we want to make sure that we have that infrastructure in place to keep up with that rate of adoption of electric vehicles in Contra Costa County. The other thing is workforce development. So we're working with Richmond Build, that is really focused on how to work with the community to train people to work on electric vehicles, maintain electric vehicle charging stations, and also a rebate program. We just recently got a testimony from a local constituent about how they were able to receive a rebate on their e-bike. And now that they have this e-bike, they're able to take their e-bike to the nearest transit station in just having that e-bike has now been able to give them access to transit. You know, it's again, that first and last mile connection. And so that's all through this electric vehicle readiness blueprint, as well as a grant that we received from the California Energy Commission to implement some of these strategies locally within Richmond, Concord, and Pittsburgh. And so with the new infrastructure bill, there's a tremendous amount of funding coming down the pipeline for this, hundreds of millions of dollars. And so CCTA is working to make sure we're positioned well to receive that funding in the county. The other critical thing is accessible transportation. And, you know, we have an accessible transportation strategic plan that was adopted last year. And now we're working to implement that accessible transportation strategic plan. And this is really, you know, to get people to their medical appointments, maintain their quality of life. You know, we have a growing, aging population here in Contra Costa County. Right now, about 15% of our population, so we're about 1.2 million here in Contra Costa, 15% of those people are over the age of 65. And so by the year 2035, that population is expected to double. And so with that growing aging population, again, we want to make sure we have the programs, accessible transportation, but also making sure it's efficient. So if you have any experiences with accessible transportation in Contra Costa County, and this is paratransit, it's really served from a mix of public service through our transit operators, as well as private service through what we call non-paratransit services and nonprofits. And those services are not exactly well coordinated. And so sometimes it might, to get to a medical appointment, it may take a few hours or even several hours, depending on where you're in the county. And so we're taking this accessible transportation strategic plan and really breaking down the barriers to really provide that one-seat ride to get to your medical appointment or to get to the movie theater or community center or whatever. And that pilot was actually accomplished last year during the pandemic, where County Connection, they're the local transit operator here in Central Contra Costa County, and they actually developed this one-seat ride where they're able to understand what the services and needs are the users, and then provide that service through a one-seat ride transit service. And so this is a huge priority for Contra Costa or for CCTA, and we're looking at a way to have what we call a call center that will be able to provide a gateway to all of these services. So you don't have to call multiple phone numbers or get access that way, but be able to provide a one-seat entry point or one entry point into the system. So I mentioned, you know, how do you plan for the future with all of these things, all this dynamic? And so right now we're in the process of, you know, updating our countywide transportation plan. And this is where I feel like the Citizens Advisory Committee could really play a valuable role in this process, because what we need to understand and what we need to know is what's happening out there on the ground. What does the public need in terms of transportation? We're right now we're working off the 2017 countywide transportation plan, and I basically have told staff let's just throw that thing in the trash. You know, let's start over, because what we've realized through the pandemic is going to require a completely different vision, goals, and strategies. And I think the other thing that we want to do is make sure we've got an outcome-based countywide transportation plan. You know, what do we actually want to achieve? What are our goals? What are the metrics? How do we want to measure these projects and programs by? So that way we can report back out to the public about how we're doing to achieve those goals through the future. And so in this countywide transportation plan, typically what we do is go through an analysis of, you know, what types of projects and programs are going to be needed, or what types of projects are going to be needed to make this happen. And so there'll be a list of projects, and that list of projects is going to be important as we kind of look towards the future, especially if someday, you know, I can't tell you when because the board has to approve it, but at some point in the time, we are going to want to go out and extend our existing measure. And so we want to make sure we've got the right set of projects to do that. And so I think, again, this is where I feel like the Citizens Advisory Committee can be really valuable to really help us kind of shape what the CTP will look like. So that concludes my presentation, and happy to take, you know, any questions, comments, and just think about, any comments about transportation in general. It doesn't necessarily have to be questions about the presentation, but I'm really, the reason why I wanted to give this presentation, because I'm really interested in your input in terms of the direction that we're going. Do you like the direction that we're going? And then more, how do you think the Citizens Advisory Committee could be involved in shaping that vision?
Thank you. Thank you, Tim. I'd like to, that was a great presentation, and I'd like to not delay in allowing any of the members who have some questions to ask. I have some, but and it looks like Rosa's iPhone has hand up. So let's see, I clicked on ask to unmute. So if they would like to make a comment.
Great presentation. I was clapping earlier, so great presentation. Awesome. So just maybe just further expand on citizen advisory's feedback. So we're going to give you feedback, but not help with communication, and maybe more detail as to what the expectations are. I definitely have a lot of feedback, but I just want to make sure that what you're expecting, I can meet. So number one, I really loved your comments about the one bus. Just love the concept of just one ride. Love that. And thank you for taking care of transit and the disabled and the older communities. And then just some feedback. Just some feedback. I think what were my two things that I really care about? Oh, shoot, yeah, I forgot. Why don't you ask your questions? I totally forgot my two comments that are important to me. I'll get back to.
All right, thank you very much.
Well, Rosa, I would just say that, Matt is here. So like, if you have feedback, we want your feedback. It doesn't necessarily have to be today or tonight, and so if you want to send Matt an email or send Terry Ann an email about what your feedback might be. I'm not trying to put you all on the spot, but I guess I'm trying to really kind of start the dialogue, if you will. This does not have to happen tonight. So I just want to open the door, for good feedback from the Citizens Advisory Committee as we kind of walk through this process, because this process is going to be a long process. We're talking about a 2-year process. And as we're developing, I guess I failed to really talk about the actual process. And so we're developing action plans, and those action plans are really a guide of what we may want to see in our local roads and in our communities. And then after we develop these action plans, which is developed at each of the subregions, so SWAT, TransPac, WICTAC, TransPlan, and then we take those action plans and we develop the countywide transportation plan. And through the CTP process, there'll be a tremendous amount of public engagement, more so than you probably have seen in the past. Because like I said, we're at this tipping point, and it's really important to understand what people's needs are for transportation, because what we thought what people's needs were before the pandemic and what they are now, they're completely different, in my opinion. And so it's going to be important to understand that as we kind of walk through this process.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Tim, I just wanted to add that in terms of the action plans and the countywide plan, we came to you last October. We'll be coming back to you later this year to share with you the work that's been done on the action plan. So there will be more chances to provide specific feedback on the action plans to come in this venue.
Excellent. Excellent. I believe Member Hammond would also like to make some remarks as well. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that's an exciting vision and very visionary vision, if I can use the same word twice in a row. But there's an awful lot of meat there, and there's no way that I can remember all of the stuff from what I've got. Can we get a copy of your ViewGraph package, 1? And 2, is there perhaps a more expansive PDF or something that includes a lot of your verbal comments that were added to the ViewGraphs?
Yeah, so what we can do, maybe Matt can help with this, is we've got links on our website to a lot of the things that I just talked about. So we've got, links to the EV readiness blueprint, links to the accessible transportation strategic plan. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of information on the integrated transit plan at this point because it's kind of being developed, but what we have, we can certainly put together a little package and we'll send it with the presentation and some links. And then if there's more questions, I'm always happy to come back. So to talk about stuff.
Perfect, thanks.
Good, good. Thank you, Member Hammond. And I see that Member Ash has his hand raised as well, if he would like to go ahead and say something.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for planning for the future. I see, I don't think our cities and our transit do well at thinking 5, 10, 20 years ahead sometimes because they're so busy solving today's problems. But transit's going to change tremendously over the years ahead. So I'm glad for CCTA doing that. There are two things that stand out to me where the agency could focus. One is those multi-city sort of access roads. So I think of Kirker Pass to Ignacio, right? You're cutting through what, 5 cities there to from 4 to 680. But the cities can't do it alone, nor should they, right? If Walnut Creek is coordinating the lights, but that stops at the Concord border, you come over that hill and, it messes everything up. And that's where the traffic goes. And the same thing, using that same example, if you can't get everybody into the BART parking lot fast enough for the Walnut Creek BART, you can't get everybody onto 680 or 24 fast enough, or if 4 is backed up at the interchange, right? They all blend together. And you guys are sort of the one agency that can bring some of these cities together to coordinate those traffic signals and changing that road all together. Because if you change half of it, it doesn't work. So that's my first big takeaway. And the second one, Matt, this should be no surprise to you, is coordinating with like East Bay Parks and on the trails and the cities for lighting to BART access. I bet you if you look at the numbers for BART and just, I could just talk about Concord, Pleasant Hill, and Walnut Creek. I'm the Walnut Creek representative here. If you look at the Canal Trail on the way to the Pleasant Hill BART, which so many people ride or could ride, they'll do it 40% of the year, but they won't do it the other 60% because it is pitch black on that route. And it becomes unsafe and it's dangerous. And just some simple lighted path could increase your bike by 20. And that decreases that decreases, a dozen other access roads. So those are the two big areas where I think you could bring people together. And I use examples and roads that I'm familiar with, but I think that echoes throughout the counties. And if you look at similar examples throughout.
So Commissioner Ash, right? Member Ash, not commit, Member Ash. So
I'm a commissioner in Walnut Creek too. It all relative.
So I think your first comment, you literally hit the nail on the head. I mean, so that is what we're trying to achieve with these action plans, is to identify these roads that go through multi-jurisdictions, right? And I completely agree with you. This is where CCTA needs to take a bigger role on these roads like Ignacio Valley Road or Pleasant Hill Road or San Pablo Avenue, and so, and take a bigger role in really kind of coordinating these routes, because just like the freeways, we need these more reliable local roads that are efficient, right, to move people. And so your first point was dead on. The second point is kind of an interesting one, and I'm probably going to stick my foot in my mouth right now, but I personally ride my bike to work every single day. And so I actually take the Contra Costa Canal Trail to work every single day. I live in Pleasant Hill, and when I'm here late at night at the office, I specifically do not take the trail back because it's too dark. And then you know what I do is I sit there and I navigate Contra Costa Boulevard home because it's got much more light, much more traffic, and in some weird way, I feel safer on Contra Costa Boulevard than I do on a dark trail. So
that was you. I almost hit. Oh, I'm sorry, man. What's interesting, I mean, I walk the talk. My family and I only have one car, and I walk, I bike, I take transit everywhere where I go.
And so I live this on a daily basis. And so this is why this vision is so important to me. In some ways it's self-serving, but I think I represent a lot of the people that are trying to do the same things that I'm trying to do.
And I think in some previous meetings and conversations with Matt, we've narrowed down, you know, some of the players for that, like for those trails, because everybody sort of, I mean, I must have talked to 4 or 5 different entities and they've all pointed to that the other has the control. And it really is going to take like East Bay Parks getting together with PG&E and the city of Walnut Creek and the city of Pleasant Hill and Concord, and sitting down and formulating that plan to do that. And again, it doesn't have to be on every trail, right? But what are the access points into the public transit at least, right? Your office is public transit accessible. And so other people can take it in there. And then it just further your overall goals that you just presented to us.
Yeah, I will say that the biggest barrier to all of this is funding, right?
Yeah.
It's the biggest barrier to all of this is funding. So
Always.
And so I think, you know, this is why that CTP is so important, is that we need to develop the list of projects. And then at some point, the board will decide on how to fund those projects, right? And so I would say that's why it's important that, you know, in the future, we will probably need your help.
Right. And you know, one of the things, this funding question and something, and where I would like to kind of take some of the comments, points to some of the things that may be highly impactful may not be very obvious how to fund. And let me, I guess I'll give an example, right? So traditionally, when I think of CCTA, I think of, when I think of a CCTA project, I think of a lot of data analysis, but at the end, somewhere, some trucks with concrete are going to pour something, or some paint's going to be put down somewhere. And those are some very physical thoughts about how to improve the safety or efficiency of a community, you know, a road or a path, right? But like one of the things that has been drilled into our heads by a lot of the presentations here is that removing a certain percentage of, you know, traffic from the road altogether has an outsized effect on the efficiency of how the, you know, the existing you know, paths and so forth work. The point I'm getting at is, for example, right now, the East Bay, the far East Bay, 4 communities, Oakley, Brentwood, Antioch.
Pittsburgh and Antioch, yeah.
And Pittsburgh and Antioch. Those guys have gotten together and they've done this sort of idea that I've had in the back of my head, which is they put out this thing called cutthecommute.net, and it's a survey asking voluntarily every resident of the far East Bay to submit you know, where they live, where they commute to, who their employer is, and what method by which you know, what's the method that they currently use to get to their employer. They're looking at this as you know, they're going to gather their data, they're going to see something like, oh wow, we've got 457 employees from Salesforce here in the far East Bay, right? They're going to use the results of this to target employers that are creating vast commutes to attempt to you know, have their economic development people approach them to put some office space out in the far East Bay. Now, it's gonna, if that happens, that's, you know, potentially hundreds to thousands of vehicles that are no longer, or it's you know, hitting 242, Highway 4, you know, 80, 680, whatever. So it's also potentially takes some stress off of other transit options as well. My point is, I hope that the CCTA could consider some unconventional means by which to not just improve transit, but also to potentially do things that remove the need for some of the transit, reduce demand because it's actually not needed. This is that kind of project. It's not making a new road there. It's making it so that hundreds or thousands of people don't have to drive on them. And that is a highly impactful activity, because if it works, I'm not saying that it will, but if it works, it will have other second order effects, like those are some people that will have more time with their families or to participate on civic boards like this. That's more participation in families and communities because of not having, 2 hours in and 2 hours back from the office. So I would say that the whole, and again, I'm going to go back to one last thing, and then I promise I'll put the talking stick down. But the thing is, remember Ash mentioned, and you mentioned some of these multimodal things that cross across jurisdictions and stuff. And we've gotten to this place where we're, as you said, fully built out for the most part. We can't just decide to lay a new track of a BART somewhere, or even adding bus lines and stuff. We have congested roads. We don't have room to open up those roads, expand things. We have gotten to this place because each of the transits agencies has operated inside its silo, perhaps very effectively from one border to the other. But city planning, regional planning has been abdicated completely, in the sense of there's been no concept of planning transit from the East Bay to the peninsula or something, because that crosses so many different transit agencies and cities and counties, and so you could not build BART today because nobody's working together at the Bay Area level. No one could say something like, hey, employer in the South Bay, please relocate some of your jobs, because that may negatively, that will be not necessarily in the interest of one small local fiefdom in the South Bay, but it might be in the entire Bay Area's significant greater interest. And there's sort of no boss over everybody that can do this kind of regional planning anymore. That's what we lost the ability to do. Sorry, I rambled on forever. So, but there you go.
I'll just respond one moment. So during the pandemic, because of this, transit, I'll say pandemic.
Upheaval,
Yeah,
right? It's an
upheaval.
upheaval.
MTC, our Metropolitan Planning Organization, they started doing what's called the Blue Ribbon Task Force. And so the Blue Ribbon Task Force, if you have an opportunity to look into that, it was really an attempt to have better coordination of transit agencies across the entire Bay Area. I think there's like 27 transit agencies in the Bay Area. And so something along those lines. It's 20 plus. It's definitely 20 plus. So
yeah.
And so the goal of this was to better coordinate all of this together. In fact, and some do not like it, or and some do like it, but there is a bill right now, AB 912 or 915, that really attempts to bring together a more coordinated transit system in the Bay Area. And in this Blue Ribbon Task Force, there's a number of outcomes. There was really two big outcomes, I think, in my mind. One is it identified areas where we were already coordinating. So I think sometimes we don't realize that this coordination is already happening because the government does not do a good job of telling about our own successes, right?
Right.
And so we are already doing a lot of this coordination. A lot of people just don't know about it. So that was one big win, is really understanding where this coordination is already happening, and then two, where the gaps are, right? And that's something, there's an implementation task force that's been formed, and to help really fill those gaps, in implementation. And some of those might be integrated fare systems.
Yes, that's the first thing I thought of.
Better wayfinding, those types of things that could really help provide a more seamless transit system.
Tim, the bill you mentioned relates to acupuncture licensing. So if there's another, when you figure out the exact bill number, can somebody send it out to the group. I'd be curious to look at it.
We're on pins and needles. Yes, no.
You know why? Because
No.
it's Senate Bill 9, it's Senate Bill,
SB, got it.
SB, not AB, Senate Bill.
Senate Bill, what number?
I think 912 or 915.
Okay.
As a planning commissioner, like member Ash, I'm a planning commissioner here in the city of Clayton. I can tell you, of course, there's been much hand wringing about SB 8, 9, 10, 35, et cetera. I could go through a long list of those, but I do believe in my heart that kind of where there are, like I said, there are instances where decisions need to be made on a regional level that may not be in the best interests of a set of employers or a particular county or something, but would be in the greater interest of the Bay Area at large. I'm not opposed to things like SB 8, 9, 10 kinds of things if they're aimed a little bit more in the right direction. I think I won't opine about those things, but I think we're just shoving more housing into places, but it's just going to create more traffic headaches, and I'd rather solve the traffic headaches and make it where every person, if you wanted like a metric, how about a commute under an hour and 15 minutes for every person in the Bay Area? That would be like, that's a headline that will sell, right? But it will require some cooperation across.
That could be a potential outcome in our countywide transportation plan.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so, and it's SB 917. That's what it is.
917. Thank you
Messed
for
up
that.
3 times. Third time's a charm.
Very interested in looking at that.
Sorry,
myself.
Terry Ann. SB 917.
Cool.
Too many bills to keep track of.
Yeah, exactly. And then don't they reuse numbers
Yeah,
each
they
year?
do.
That drives me insane. Should keep it unique. All right. Well, are there other questions? I hadn't seen any hands just yet, but I would like to give others opportunities to ask if they're, well, we don't have Mr. Hale very often.
This is Rosa again. I'm going to take advantage of remembering what my comments were. My first feedback was on the goal of Vision Zero. Remember, Vision Zero is 0 accidents. So my suggestion, my feedback is for 0 accidents, you cannot have a pedestrian in the car in the same physical space. So if you do wish to, I mean, there's realistic, your example of riding your bike on a road, Contra Costa Road, you're talking about statistically numbers. There's a probability that there's going to be an accident. So maybe just a suggestion is put the numbers up there. What's the probability of getting hurt in an accident or getting hit just having an accident when you do have mixed shared spaces? And I know that everybody wants to share, but I just believe that if you want to have 0 accidents, you need to separate the pedestrians from the bikes and the bikes from the cars. It's really hard, it's expensive, but to get Vision Zero, we probably just need to give those guidelines and then just give people the probability of, if I ride my bike down the road, what's the probability of that, or encourage like bike lanes separated from pedestrians. So that's my first comment in terms of the planning and having that kind of guideline. And then just a second feedback based on the conversation we've had today. We'll probably need to reach out to planning. I live in El Cerrito and I used to be against people building here in my neighborhood. But I realized that the fact that everybody's moving out towards the East Bay is creating a lot of traffic here in my neighborhood. So now I'm more open to building more near a transit station because that's what's going to eliminate the commute. So sometimes our building codes, we prohibit people from building, and maybe looking at the whole, everything in government, how it affects our commute. So that's why during the committee, it does affect those long commute times. And then I think that's the third feedback. Oh crap, I forgot again. I'll forget it. I'm just speaking too much. No, the third comment had nothing to do with our group, but it just, I hate it when I'm in a car and I'm driving and the road is blocked. So I've noticed that a lot of neighborhoods are privatizing streets now. And I guess that's okay if you privatize a street, but when a street is meant for a car, it does create a lot of, creates havoc when a road is closed. Everybody thinks we talked about thoroughfares where people can drive. When I'm in a bike, I like to drive really fast, so I don't want pedestrians there. When I'm a pedestrian, I can barely walk. But when I'm in a car, I also just like to move consistently. I hate stopping. So one of the guidelines if we're planners is, design them so that we can move quickly and without causing a lot of havoc. So just keep in mind, if we privatize streets, consider that. Just remove them from the map so that people don't drive down there. Okay, thank you. That's my feedback. Thank you.
Thanks, Rosa. Good feedback.
All right. We may be in a place where we can give you the rest of your evening back, Mr. Hale. We'll see. It looks that way. I have to say, I really appreciate you've been very engaging. I definitely see a lot of interest. And even though people may not have stepped up with other questions here, I sense that you're going to get some written feedback, some ideas, some thoughts. And we're all going to be showing up here, doing our job, and looking forward to opportunities to be that interface and get our communities involved, and also feedback where we think we can be part of the solution. All right.
No, I thank you, Chair Miller, and I just want to say thank you for everything that all of you do for the authority and taking the time. As you just mentioned, you represent probably one of the most important aspects of what our mission is, and that's the community. And so we need to have input from the community to be successful, because those are the real users. We can only guess, right, at the end of the day. So you play a really important, critical role here at the authority. And so I really appreciate you doing that. And like I said, you know where to find us, you know where to find Matt, and we welcome your feedback and your input at any time. It doesn't necessarily have to be at these public meetings. So yeah, you represent the community, and that's important to me, and it's important to the authority. So again, thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll try and have an impact together. Thank you. All right. Of course, I need to go back to my notes to get back to the script that I seem to be incapable of following this evening. It's important that we ask if there are any members of the public that would like to make any comments, or Terry Ann, did we receive any written public comments about this particular agenda item either?
No written public comments, and I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for presenting your vision of the future, Mr. Director, and we'll look forward to assisting you in the future. All right. With that, we'll close public comment, and we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which will be the thing I alluded to earlier from Matt. Tried to make him step on his boss, but he didn't take the bait. So this will be discussing changes that have happened to the Measure J checklist this year and other plans. So Matt, would you like to take that away?
Yeah, thanks, Chair Miller. Good evening, Citizens Advisory Committee members. Matt Kelly, Senior Transportation Planner with CCTA. The next two items are related to the Measure J Growth Management Program Compliance Checklist. I'm just going to talk about the first item briefly, and then I'll get into the details of the second item. The first item is really just to announce the fact that we have or will be releasing very shortly the calendar year 2020 and 2021 Measure J Growth Management Program Compliance Checklist, and make it available to the 19 cities, towns, and the county, for a total of 20 that are required to submit their checklist every 2 years. As you I know we have new members here who may have missed the last checklist cycle, or members that came in during last year's checklist cycle. That's why we wanted to bring you these two items tonight to make you familiar with the checklists and what's important about them and what your role is in reviewing and recommending their approval. So we release the checklist every other year in the odd year, in the even year. And then the checklists are due by June 30th of the odd year. So all 20 checklists are due to the authority by June 30th of 2023. That doesn't mean they have to all come before this committee by then. They just have to be submitted to the authority by then, and sometimes we don't get them to you guys till later that fall. We've encouraged the cities to submit their checklists early so that we can better manage your meeting schedule and staff resources on reviewing the checklists. But basically, these are the mechanisms for the 20 jurisdictions demonstrating their compliance with the Measure J Growth Management Program. As part of Measure J, all 20 jurisdictions are required to be compliant with this program. We believe that this is the reason that the Growth Management Program was the reason that Measure J passed in 2004, and with over 70% of the vote countywide, we had tried it before, and it didn't pull as well. But once we added the GMP, it pulled much better and ended up passing overwhelmingly. So I will get into the details of the checklist in the next item, but really just wanted to let you know that we'll be releasing it. We are releasing it in an electronic format this time, so that the jurisdictions will be submitting an electronic form, an online form, and attaching their PDFs or whatever attachments they have to that. Hopefully it'll be a cleaner submittal. Hopefully you'll have a cleaner version on your end to review. So they can start submitting now. And like I said, they have till next June, but the soonest we would probably start seeing a checklist is within the next month or so that they would be received by the authority. And then the earliest you would see it would probably be at your July meeting, but most likely it'll probably be fall before we have anything get all the way through to you guys. So that's all I have on the actual release of the checklist. It goes to the city staff. We send it to a checklist preparer, the city manager, the planning director, as well as, I think we include the mayor as well. We make sure everybody knows that it's going out, and we want to make sure it's going out too, because you can reach out to your local city staff and make sure, I encourage you to encourage them to
Look at it, fill it out.
Early.
Yeah.
If you notice that your city, it's May of 2023 and you haven't seen your city's checklist, feel free to reach out and make sure they're working on it, because this is how they get the return to source funds. And for some cases for the county, it's millions of dollars per year. For cities like Ed's, it's not quite that much, but it's around 400,000 for a city like Clayton, which for a city
on a percentage basis, that's not small, trust me.
Yes, yeah. They can use it to repair potholes, to repave streets, to pave bike and ped paths, to put in ADA curb cuts, to pay for city staff time in actually preparing the checklist. So, cities aren't having to use their own money to participate in the growth management program activities. They can use the checklist return to source funds to pay for that, but they can use it for basically anything transportation related. So we don't want the cities to be sitting, we don't want to be sitting on the city's money. And that's what we do. We sometimes sit on it for over a year, and we think it should be out at the cities being spent. So that's me on my
you guys don't want to be a plastic bottle return kind of program. You'd like to disperse your monies and get them where they're needed.
Exactly, because we know it's down to the lowest level of potholes. it's needed, for all users. That helps the buses, the bikes, everybody. So yeah, so that's it for the announcement of the checklist. I'll turn it back to you, Chair Miller, and you can introduce the next item if there are no questions.
I have one question for you, and this is really sort of asking on behalf of the, some of the newer members who haven't been here. And that is, we all came here hoping to have an impact and ask questions and so on and so forth. But what would you say to a person who is sort of wondering how their actions on this can actually influence these cities? Obviously, we're not sitting here. I don't want to say that we're just checking a box here. But we're also not sitting here booing and jeering and putting thumbs down, and somebody walks away from the table because we're upset that they didn't fix some timing on some stoplights on a Kirker Pass or something, right? Yeah. So what is the opportunity for members here to exert influence on for the benefit of their community during this process?
So for the checklist process, it's a bit of a strange process because they are reporting on what happened in the past. So they are, for this checklist cycle, they're reporting on what happened in the city or the county or the town in 2020 and 2021.
They're back for a refill.
Yeah, so basically to affect what happened on the checklist they'll be presenting, you kind of had to be involved with the city last year or the year before. So I would encourage that you're always, some of you are on other, commissions, transportation commissions, things like that. So you are already doing that. But I would encourage you as a Citizens Advisory Committee member to attend council meetings when there's things related to transportation or housing, and really, speak up and be that kind of two-way conduit between CCTA and your local jurisdiction. And I think the countywide plan and the action plans are a great way that you can be actively involved in what's going on and not just looking back in the past. There, you're looking to the future. So when we come back to you later this year, I think that's where we'll be looking for your input there. And we've been doing a lot of work there. I think it'll be exciting for you to see what we've been doing over the last several months, working with your local staff and the public on these action plans. But on the checklist itself, I would encourage you, it's really, the city reporting on what they've done. So like I said, these actions have already taken place, but I would encourage you to, when you see a checklist come in, you're going to start to see checklists that look good and do a really good job of reporting back what the city has done and really how the city is demonstrating its compliance with the growth management program. You'll see some that don't do as good a job at telling that story. You also see that in the presentations when the cities come to this committee and provide that. I feel like my job is to get the checklist and that presentation to the point where it's presentable to you guys. So there's a lot of behind the scenes work going on between me and city staff to get things presentable. Sometimes these things come in and they're not up to speed, and I really say, hey, I can't take this to my Citizens Advisory Committee. I don't want you guys to have to determine whether a city is in compliance or not. You can certainly always question that, but I'm going to make sure they meet the minimum levels of that compliance requirement. So I'm going to make sure they do check the boxes, but I want you guys to, if you don't feel like they've gone, they don't need to be jumping through a ton of hoops, but they at least need to do a good job of presenting what they've done to be compliant with the growth management program and really demonstrate that they are active participants in the growth management program, that they are actively trying to implement the action plans and the goals of the action plans that they've set out, that the councils have all weighed in on. So
here's the
Yeah.
two things I heard from you, Matt, and I can summarize them very quickly. One is the actions at your city councils, at your local, planning, transportation commission councils, et cetera. That's where a lot of the action is. And don't forget that, not through this Zoom screen, but at those councils and through the hard work that takes place over the 2 years, that's where you can continue to be an advocate and a voice there as a member of this community, and have that impact. And the second piece is where it does seem like maybe there's a lack of planning and coordination or organization as these checklists are offered up. There's an opportunity to offer some suggestions about what would you like to see differently when that checklist is presented again 2 years from then. Say, would really like to see some motion in this direction and some information about this kind of thing, and would really like to see some sort of action on the problems with the traffic flow through at this roundabout or something. There are places you can still feed opportunities for improvement.
Yeah, and you guys have the discretion to ask a city to come back if you don't feel like their checklist did a good enough job of demonstrating what they've been doing and their GMP activities. It's
always a balancing act, because a lot of these cities the staffs have been reduced, or they've experienced recent turnover, and this is the person who got handed to it 3 months ago. And so there has to be some context and understanding and appreciation for the circumstances. But yes, I agree with you.
And as part of that checklist approval, the staff report that's in your packet, you'll see that we are offering to train the local staff, especially the new local staff persons, because there has been a lot of turnover at the local agencies. And a checklist takes finance department, takes planning department, takes public works department, and housing if they've got that to put it together. So
many hands. Yes,
many hands. Takes a village.
All right. And so I'm going to ask for if there was any public feedback. I'm going to open public comment for this, and then we can move on. I think you're wanting to get to the next item, so you can really get to the meat and potatoes of things. So are there any, I would like to open for public comment, anything about this particular agenda item. Terry Ann, did we receive any public written comments about this? And do we see any hands from the public, people who'd like to speak?
We have no written comments and no verbal comments either.
Okay. All right, then I will close public comment for this item, and we will move on to the next one. Don't want to keep everybody out late tonight. All right, so the next item on the agenda is informational item from Matt Cali to provide a biannual growth management program compliance checklist tutorial. Please proceed.
Can you see my PowerPoint? Let me get it in slideshow mode.
It's the classic. There you hit F5. Very good. All right.
Oh,
One more setting, Matt.
One more. Here we go.
Swap it to presenter. Yeah.
Love it.
Wow.
That should be. Yeah, there we go. Perfect.
All right. Okay. Good evening. I'm still Matt Kelly, and I'm just really going to walk you through when there is a checklist in your packet. Like I said, starting later this year, you may have a couple in your packet. And as Terry Ann knows, some of the checklist submittals may be 300, 400 plus pages. That's because we've asked for a lot of documents. Sometimes they submitted an excerpt, sometimes they submit the entire document. We post whatever they've actually submitted, but we also provide a reduced version in the packet. However, that reduced version doesn't have everything. So I encourage you as CAC members to look at the full 400-page version. But what I'm going to do today is kind of walk you through what you should be looking at. There's things that folks or that the cities were required to submit once when they adopted a resolution 15 years ago. They have to resubmit that every time, or at least tell us that it's on file. So you don't have to go look at that TDM resolution every time. It's on file with CCTA. But there are other things that I do want you looking at each time because they're new materials. So that's kind of what I'm going to focus on in tonight's tutorial. I don't like to be a teacher, so if I sound too preachy, teachy, let me know. Hopefully I'll just be kind of walking you through explaining why it's a requirement and what you should be looking. So just some history on the GMP. It really was designed to make sure that new development, new housing, new commercial development pays for itself. So when something new goes in like that, you need new streets, you need new infrastructure, sewers, all that kind of stuff. So development should pay for itself. And that requires this cooperative planning amongst local jurisdictions. And that's where the action plans come in and where Tim was talking about having this cooperative planning across jurisdictions because traffic does not see borders. So and the GMP would support land use patterns that make more efficient use of our existing transportation system and support infill development. So development around existing transportation infrastructure and away from green fields, especially places like Far East County where there's still a lot of agricultural land in production. So the compliance checklist, I think I went through some of these things. It's required by all 20 jurisdictions. There's 13 questions that they need to answer. It must be submitted, like I said, by June 30th of next year. Submitting one checklist releases 2 fiscal years of LSM funds, local streets and roads maintenance funds. Like I said, it's called LSM, but it can be spent on any transportation expenditure. This year, this fiscal year, there will be 19.4 million that gets dispersed to the 20 jurisdictions based on the population and road miles of each city. There's a formula that determines that share. And you guys determine their compliance status. You receive a presentation from staff, and then you recommend or don't recommend approval to the authority board. And next slide. So the first item on the checklist is action plans. So these action plans are these sub-regional transportation planning documents. So there's a Central County one, an East County one, West County, and then there's a La Marinda and a Tri-Valley one. And the Tri-Valley one, we actually cross the county boundary and work with Alameda County on that one, the Tri-Valley portion of Alameda County. It's really to make sure that the local jurisdictions are working together, that they have a common vision for their roads that cross boundaries, and that there's a process in place for how local development is analyzed and how the impacts of local development are impacting the routes of regional significance and the vision for those routes of regional significance. So I have, when Walnut Creek is, or let's say when Concord is planning a development, they have to tell Clayton and Walnut Creek and Pleasant Hill what they're doing. In Alameda County, or let's use Solano County. Solano County, if Vacaville is doing something, they don't have to tell Fairfield they're doing something. They just do it, and then Fairfield, finds out about it and comes knocking on the door. In Contra Costa County, we're unique in that we force Measure J forces local jurisdictions to work together to plan around the plan for the impacts of development. So it protects those downstream jurisdictions. And as Tim mentioned, we are in the process of updating our action plans, and we'll be coming back to you later this year with an update on where we're at with those action plans. So what the checklist is actually asking for is a list of the activities or the actions that each jurisdiction has made over those last 2 years to implement the vision, the goals, and the actions called for in each action plan. So the action plan may say, for Ignacio Valley Road, the goal is to let's see, have a level of service in intersections at D or above, or to have reduce the delay that it takes someone to turn left from a side street onto Ignacio Valley, that there's a that it's done in 2 signal cycles or less, or that there is a bike route either on Ignacio or parallel to Ignacio for the entire length. So you have these kind of visions, and then there's actions that go along with that. And an action would be, to require development to install a bike path on Ignacio Valley at their development. So you have these visions, goals, and then and objectives and actions that go along with them. And then when a development comes in and is impacting that route, the cities can then use these actions as mitigations as part of their developer agreement. And that's a lot of the ways that projects get, the transportation components of projects are funded and mitigated. So basically, you're looking for a list of actions that the city or town took place consistent with the action plan to implement the action plan. So you should see a list of routes and then actions that go along with each of those routes. And then when they do a general plan amendment, which means approving a new project that wasn't part of the last action plan, basically, how have they analyzed it under the action plan? And then that project would get, or that development would therefore be included in the next action plan. So checklist item 2 is the development mitigation program. So each sub area, those west, east, central parts of the county, they each need to have a mitigation program or a fee program, both a citywide one and a sub-region wide one that pays for the impacts of development. So when a development is approved, there is a list of fees, and it's a trip-based fee. So it's different for housing versus commercial, that must be collected by that local city for each new development. So that is something that's required around the county. Everybody has one of those in place, but they may update those from time to time. And so basically, we're asking cities to verify that they do have a program and that they are paying into that program, and that we ask for any updates to the programs as well. So here's what that would look like. For each type of housing or commercial development, there's a rate, trip rates, and then a amount of funding that goes along with that. And for a lot of this time, this funds smaller projects, but just for context, the East County fee program is much higher than other parts of the county. What you're looking here, I think, is Tri-Valley. Their fee program single-handedly paid for the State Route 4 bypass. Because there was so much development out there, they raised their fees because there was so much impact out there, and they were able to fully fund the construction of the Highway 4 bypass from, basically from Oakley to Brentwood. So that's the type of impact these fee programs can have. So checklist item 3 is the housing options. Here, we're a transportation agency. We can't tell a community, how to build their housing or where to build their housing. what we do is encourage them and incentivize them to build their housing around transit, and we offer grants to known as OBAG grants to fund improvements around transit to incentivize housing around transit. But what we do ask the cities for is to submit their annual housing progress report. It's the same progress report they submit to the state housing department. And what this does is shows how many units were approved each year and at each income level. So we can keep track of what each city has been doing. Each city is required to zone for a certain number of housing units at each income level or affordability level through the RENA process, but that's just zoning. What this tells us is how many units are actually being built. And then we also ask them to demonstrate how they are requiring new development to be supportive of transit, biking, and walking. So in general plans, we ask the local jurisdictions to put policies in there that require new housing and development in general to accommodate all those non-auto modes. So are they putting paths to transit? Are they putting in new bike ped paths? Are they putting in bus stops? Things like that. So we get the excerpts from the general plan that demonstrate those policies. And here's what the housing reports look like. So you'll see a total number of units and then the level of affordability. So hopefully you'll see high numbers of low affordability units, because that's really what's needed. The cities do pretty well on the kind of market rate units, but it's harder to do the affordable units because the developers sometimes need subsidies to build those. So it's a little harder to do, but we're starting to see more and more of it. And that's something you're free to ask the cities when they come in for their presentation. Okay, we didn't see a lot of affordable housing in your HCD report. What are you doing to increase that number? That's totally fair game to ask what they are doing to increase their affordable housing or housing.
Matt, not to interrupt, but I'll make really fast. But of course, the arena is an 8-year cycle, and we'll visit this for three times. We'll probably have opportunities to visit this, but I dare say that the state has a little bit more aggressive or interested in engaging with the communities if they're not building their low and very lows. So I think they're going to be hearing that as well from this accountability committee that's being fired up.
Yeah. So they should be ready to answer your questions, but they also should have an answer. And this is where you can also ask about ADUs, accessory dwelling units. We don't have a specific checklist question for that. If that's something you'd like us to add to the checklist, that's something we can talk about over the checklist cycle. But right now, I think they include it with their affordability factors. But accessory dwelling units are, the cities are required to have a streamlined ADU approval process. So feel free to ask about their ADUs. For those of you who don't know the jargon, are basically in-law units or second units on an existing parcel. Cities are now required to have a streamlined approval process. So feel free to ask those types of questions, because it is interesting to hear what the cities are doing, and it could give you ideas for bringing back to your city. Checklist item 4 is a traffic impact study. So basically, we just are asking the cities here to make sure that they are conducting studies for projects that meet the threshold that's called for in their local action plan. And generally, it's 100 net new peak hour trips. So if a project is generating that many new trips during the peak hour, they need to do this traffic impact study that's called for in our described in our technical procedures. We tell them how to do it, what they need to do, and what it should contain, and then that kind of lays out all the impacts to the routes of regional significance in the action plans. And so basically we ask them to list and also provide a copy of the report. So checklist item 5 is one of those things you don't really need to look at. Basically, they're just saying that yes, we participate in our RTPC meetings, the sub area meetings. We are helping or participating in updating the action plans. They're just saying yes, we do this. So if they said no, that'd be something you'd want to look at. I'd probably flag that for you in advance. But most cities or all cities are doing this. They just have to remind us that they're doing this. Item 6 is the capital improvement program. We only ask for the transportation component of it, but sometimes we get all 400 pages of each city's CIP. We just want to see the transportation projects. And really this is should be consistent with their action plan and really just daylights what transportation projects they will be constructing or trying to fund and construct over the next 5 years. So we want you to be aware of that, and we want to be aware of that. It's really just kind of a transparency process there. So you'll see a new one each checklist. Item 7, TSM programs. TSM programs, Transportation System Management. They're also known as TDM, Transportation Demand Management. It's how are the cities trying to reduce trips from auto trips? What are they doing to encourage carpools, van pools, biking and pedestrian activities? So a lot of that is done through employers or new development. When there's a multifamily new development, are they putting in car share in the new units? Are they putting in bike share, things like that? So it's something that all cities were required to adopt, and most of them adopted them about 20 years ago. So we have those on file. If we have a new one, we will put it in we will alert you of it, but otherwise the cities have these on file. And they're interesting to read, but I wouldn't have you focus on it because they've all met the requirement. Urban limit line. This is one of the most important parts of the growth management program. Basically, it requires each city to adopt an urban limit line or adopt the county's urban limit line. There are a few cities that have their own urban limit line. And basically, this is where the city draws a line on the map and says all of our development will take place inside this line. If a city decides to do any development over 30 acres outside that line, they need to go back to the voters and have a local referendum to approve that development. This is, when voters voted for Measure J, they also voted for this urban limit line and saying that, we will have compact development and reduce the need to spend more money on transportation and other infrastructure. So we really think this is one of the most important parts of the growth management program and protecting that agricultural land, especially in the east. If a city, if there are any urban limit line issues, the city needs to daylight it here. And if they change their urban limit line, they need to daylight it here. So something to look for in each checklist. We don't typically have cities making any changes. So that is a good thing, and that is part of the strength of the GMP. It makes it so cities, it's not worth their while to expand the urban limit. Yeah, so if there is something, they have to provide an attachment, a finding of consistency if something came before their council. Item 9 is adoption of the growth management element. This is something that all cities were required to do as part of Measure J adoption. That's happened back in 2009. So each city's general plan must contain a growth management element. Basically aligns their general plan with the growth management program, spells out those policies that are required. So like I said, this all took place by 2009. We have one on file for each jurisdiction, but if it changes, we provide that to you. If they update their GME, we provide that to you. But don't want to have you focus on it too much because they've all met the requirement. Item 10, this is an easy one for cities to do. If they are getting Measure J funding of $250,000 or more, they are required to put up a nice sign that trumpets whose money is being spent. All we want is for when Measure J money is being spent, that the city or the drivers that drive past the sign know about it. And you saw these on Highway 4, the construction that was going on through the 680 interchange. You'll also see it on projects on the Iron Horse Trail or smaller projects like that, or pavement projects in local cities. So if you see a project in your city and you think Measure J money is being spent on it and you don't see our logo somewhere, ask your city, because when it comes down to the checklist, they need to provide a list of all those projects. And I've been asking for them to provide a picture as well for the checklist submittal, just so you have proof. That's not required, but I'm asking for it from the cities. Item 11 is maintenance of effort. This is basically saying since all the cities are getting 18% of Measure J back for return to source funds, presumably to pay for local street maintenance, that the cities aren't purely relying on that source, that they're also putting in their own general funds for maintenance. So basically we looked at what they were paying for local maintenance when Measure J was passed, or sorry, 1997, Measure C was passed. And we looked at what they were spending then and basically said, okay, that's kind of your benchmark. You should continue spending at a level equal to that. And then in addition to the funds you receive from Measure J. The only city that doesn't have a requirement is Oakley, because they weren't a city in 1997. So they have a bit of they have a lower benchmark there, but because they are a new city, they had to spend a lot of money up front on their local streets and roads, so they didn't require the same level of maintenance. But you'll see a city like Oakley does spend a lot of their general fund money on maintenance, so they don't generally have a hard time meeting the requirement. But what we tell the cities to submit is their requirement, the amount they've spent each of the 2 fiscal years that are under that checklist. So where a city may have a relatively low requirement like Brentwood, you'll see they generally overspend, or they generally overspend their requirement by quite a bit. But we want that to be daylighted, so you can see what they're spending Measure J and what they're spending for their local fund. Item 12 is submittal of the LSM reporting form. So what did you spend your 18% on? And so we asked for a general report. On the left, you'll see the form that basically just says what they spent their money on, by category. So what they spent on for local streets and road maintenance, what they spent for on GMP compliance work, what they spent on transit, what they spent on trails, parking, and TDM. Then we a new requirement as of 2 checklists ago is the audit reporting form. So on the right, you'll see in a more detailed form, any expenditure over $10,000, they have to report back what it was and details about it. Was it 13 ADA curb cuts? Was it 1,000 or 10,000 square feet of pavement rehab? Was it a mile of new sidewalk? Whatever it is, we want to know so we can report out how Measure J funds were spent at the local level, and that really helps. That helps you guys know what your cities are spending their money on. It helps us know what your cities are spending their money on, and I think it's just a good piece of information to really help push your cities to spend their some money both on time and on the right things. So, and it also lets you know how much money your cities are sitting on. They have to report what's in the bank, and we'd rather see that amount empty and that they're spending the full amount each year. That you'll get an idea of what those look like as those start coming in. Yeah, so that's item 12. And item 13 is really just if they think they've been doing something that really satisfies the GMP that's not, that's not outlined in any one of the previous 12 questions, they can provide evidence of that there. And that's all 13 items, I think. Yeah, that's the end of my slideshow. I can take any questions. I really hope it gives you a better idea of what these things mean, why they're in the checklist, how they kind of relate to the growth management program, and what you should be looking for and what you shouldn't be looking for. So I'll take any questions. And I provided you a copy, so hopefully you can use that in the packet. So hopefully you can use that as a a guide when you're reviewing your checklists.
Chair Miller.
Oh, yep.
Hi. Hi, Matt. Can I ask? I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
One is that you said to check with your local city municipality, see if they've submitted their compliance checklist. How would we know they've done that before it becomes a public meeting?
Yeah, so they need to take the checklist to the council first for approval before submitting it to us. So that would be the first way to know that it's being looked at by the city and that it's coming this way.
You can engage your city staff, though. I mean, city staff can talk to you without having to engage the council to let you know that they've received it and are working on it.
That was going to be a follow-up question.
Yeah.
Is there anybody
honestly,
particularly?
Sorry.
Sorry, is there anybody particularly on staff?
I can let you know. We have a checklist contact at each city that I can provide to you. Definitely. So if you just want to send me an email, I'll give you that contact person.
Okay.
Yeah, because we definitely like to have you talking to them.
Okay, and then another question where to find it is, I think you said, make sure that the action plan, that they're the compliance with the action plans. That would be, I assume, like within the city's website. Obviously it's separate from the general plan.
So the action plans are actually on our website. They may have a link to them on their website, but but they're a CCTA document.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, thank you. And
Good question.
Okay.
Yeah. And I encourage you guys to look at the existing action plans ahead of, and maybe that we were going to put together a list of things that Tim was talking about, links, things Tim was talking about. So we'll throw a link to the action plans there too, so you can take a look at that ahead of our next action plan discussion at this meeting.
Cool. That's good questions.
Yeah, and member Linder, just so you know, staff doesn't know when checklists are coming in generally. So like, unless we've been paying attention to council meetings, we don't know it's coming till it hits our doorstep.
Until you know it
Yeah.
either. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. And you guys are just about to send these out, right? They should be
Yeah.
maybe arriving in like June timeframe or something like that.
Probably by next week, yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. Well, Matt, oh wait, no, Mr. Moriarty. Member Moriarty, would you like to go ahead and?
Yeah,
Oh no, that's applause. That's applause, actually. Sorry, right?
No, I had a quick question.
Mhm.
Item number 2, the mitigation for development projects. So there's the formula that cities use to figure out how much the developer contributes. But how can we do a better job of not just seeing the numbers, but being aware of how that money is spent? Because the money that's collected isn't necessarily used to mitigate the effects of the development, is it? And how can we make sure that there's a connection between the money collected and the mitigation for the project?
Yeah, so I can't speak to the city programs as well because they each is a little bit differently, run a little bit differently. As far as the sub-regional programs, because they're paying a regional fee and a local fee. The sub-regional programs, they vote as a committee what they spend those projects on, because they're a little more regional in nature. And so about every 2 years, they see what they've, how much money they have in the fund, and then they prioritize a list of projects, and then they actually fund those projects. But they're going to be a little more regional in nature, like a Bay Trail project in West County, or like a Iron Horse Trail project in Central County, something like that kind of is a little more regional. The cities, they should be, they should be putting together a report on what they're spending their local funds on, and it should be on the website. But maybe that's something that we could consider having as part of the checklist submittal, is a report of what projects actually, what was what paid in and what was paid out, or what projects were funded, because right now they really just have to, for the checklist, demonstrate that they are part of that process, not what they actually spent.
Okay, it sounds like I see developments going on in Pinole, and I know they're paying into that fund because they have to, but it's not very transparent that there is any mitigation to impact or reduce the impact on the transportation system. I don't see a direct, I don't see a way to connect the dots, and I'd like to.
Right, and sometimes there's project-specific mitigations that are part of the development agreement, where the city says, we won't approve this project unless you do A, B, and C.
Right.
So that's kind of a different component, but that they're presumably required to implement as part of the project. Then when they're paying into this fee program, generally what happens is they wait till there's enough money in there to do something.
Right.
And so for smaller cities, say like Pinole, Kent, they may not have enough money to do anything meaningful for
years,
10 years.
Yeah.
So that's what may be happening.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to look at these development formulas and stuff, because I mean, it is very formulaic. Like, I see things in these formulas, for example, like they go to the school district, and so forth based on the number of, anticipated, number of houses that are going into areas, stuff like that. But drawing a direct line from A to B, you and I grew up with the idea of these massive subdivisions that come in, and then they say, okay, well, you're going to have to build an elementary school, and you're going to have to reserve some parkland, right? You and I, we draw a line directly from this developer is offsetting these parts of the infrastructure for the city. These formulaic things are a little bit different. They're just sort of like they throw them into the till, and the city knows that there are things that they have to get done, but they just wait for them to accumulate. In our smaller little communities like Clayton, just wait for those development funds to accumulate before you can really do anything meaningful with them. It's not an A to B kind of thing.
Yeah, I would
Good
say,
question, though.
As a resident, you'd want to push for the project-specific mitigations because those are funded directly by the developer as part of the project.
Like we're gonna have to put in a controlled light intersection or something. That's a good example of a small mitigation that could be required to be fully funded.
Yeah.
Or improvements to a road to expand a traffic artery or something into that area. I think that looks like that's it for potentially maybe some of the questions. If it's okay with everyone, I'm gonna go ahead and open up for public comments as we're required to do, and then see where we go from there. Terry, and I'd like to open up for public comment if any members of the public would like to raise their hand or something to speak about this particular agenda item, or have submitted any comments in writing. Could you comment to that, please?
Yes, we have received no written public comments, and we have no public in the meeting with us.
Okay, it's a shame. It's really good information for us. All right, with that, then I'm going to close public comment and move on to the next item on the agenda. Thank you very much, Matt, for your hard efforts here in getting us, especially new members, up to speed. And it's always a good refresher for us who've been here for a while as well, and things are always changing anyway. Appreciate
just
it.
a point. It's 8 o'clock. I was just wondering how long the rest of the agenda are we looking to take?
We're now just into basically asking people if they have any reports, staff reports, and comments. And so we're almost to the finish line here.
Oh, okay.
I'd say we're 5 to 6 minutes to being done here. 5 to 10 minutes at most. All right, moving on. So the next item on the agenda is reports. This is basically asking, has anyone here attended, say, maybe one of the attended either the major CCTA meeting or any of the sub meetings and want to report what you've seen there? If so, raise your hand and I'll call on you.
This is Claire raising my hand.
Yes, Claire.
Hi, I just wanted to say really quickly that I saw the most recent countywide bike and pedestrian plan meeting, and there was an item on long distance bike highways. And they talked about a number of things, including, best practices in design. So member Ash, I hear you 100% about the lighting situation at Pleasant Hill BART. And you might be interested to see that there is some stuff, early stages yet, for making those commute corridors fully lit, complete transit corridors. So FYI.
Good to have your eyes and ears out there for us,
Great.
member
Thank you.
Linder. Great. All right. Anyone else with observations from other authority boards meetings? All right. Then let's move on to member and staff comments. Anyone something that they'd like to share from media or other Bay Area happenings related to our type of work here? So raise your hand. All right. And I'm not going to extend the time here by just re-mentioning once more that the cutthecommute.net is being done by the East Bay, a survey to find out how people are commuting to their work and who their employers are, in an attempt to have their economic councils approach those employers and see if they can get some changes on the ground. So I appreciate you guys hearing me out on that one. We can close that item, number 6, and move on to course number 7, correspondence and communications. There weren't any in our packet. Next item. I don't think there is any correspondence and communications unless staff has some to bring up at this time. All right.
So, just wanted to report, I don't know if everyone saw my email that I sent out, but the board did approve for the remote meetings to continue through August. However, under Assembly Bill 361, we still have to reevaluate it every 30 days. So
Right.
while that is the action, it could change at any given time based on the local health recommendations from the Contra Costa Health Services. So just keep in mind that that is the current approval and recommendation by the board, but it could change at the upcoming meeting on June 15th. So we're just continuing to monitor that, but just wanted to give you a brief update on that.
Very good. Very good. All right. Yeah, before you know it, we'll be all meeting together again in the same room. All right, moving on then to the next item on the agenda is future agenda items log. This is a place where committee members can basically mention, I'd like to see something possibly brought up or mentioned about this in the future. I also kind of wanted to point out, is the next meeting the meeting where we will vote for a chair and vice chairship, or is that is the next meeting, isn't it? Okay, so it's just, I'm just pointing that out. I'm not asking for anything, just pointing it out for folks to think about for the next meeting. People who you might want to nominate, et cetera, for the chairship and vice chairship. All right, any other requests by members for future agenda items? Okay, noting no comments. Moving on to item number 9, which is the one which Mr. Ash would really like to see happen, and that is adjournment. I really have appreciated everyone's patience this evening. Great presentations and information this night. Thank you.
Thanks.
That concludes the meeting.
Good
We'll
night.
adjourn at 8:05.
Thank you. Good
Thanks,
night.
everyone.